Hello everyone. Thanks for joining. We'll just wait for a couple of minutes. Can you guys hear me and see my screen okay? Awesome. Thanks, Ali. We'll just give a few minutes and then we can kick off because I know there was a session going on. So we'll just wait for a couple of minutes and then we can start. So just some housekeeping. If you have anything you want to ask, you can put on if you go to the session tab and then just click on that, and actually you can just post the question, or if there's anything which you want to discuss on the right hand side. Just wait for 1 more minute and then we can kick off. Who has joined so far? Can you put it in the chat so I can know who's my participants? And if you can tell the role as well, what role are you performing? That would be good for me to understand. Hi, Joy. All right. Okay. Let's kick off. Okay. First of all, thank you so much, everyone, for joining the session. My name is Wahib, and the topic of this session is what are the key pillars we have to implement the Salesforce solution. Let's go to the next slide. Right. So before I start, actually, I just want to say thanks to our sponsor to make this thing a reality. So just want to shout out about the sponsors for today's event. Right. So my name is Wahib and I'm Salesforce senior Salesforce architect. I'm Salesforce certified system architect. I'm Salesforce certified application architect. I also have 17 Salesforce certifications across different domains of Salesforce. I blog at salesforcezone.co.nz, where I try to post my views and share things which I learn along the way. And you can follow me on Twitter. My handler is Wahib Idris. Right. So today agenda. So what's agenda and what we will cover today? So this, as you can actually tell from the session title, I want to cover the key different elements of the Salesforce solution. And when you look into the solution, what are the different things you need to consider when you're proposing something or implementing solution for your clients? So first one being the system architecture. We will discuss what it tells, what does it even mean like system architecture, and why it's actually important for us to consider about the system architecture of the solution. We'll cover the data aspect of that solution, like what are the data governance aspect we need to consider, how do we handle large data volumes, and what are different things which we need to consider for that from a data perspective. Then we will consider about the solution architecture, which means that when we're designing the solution, what are the different options which we have when we're designing the solutions. Then we will consider about the security, how we will secure inbound and outbound connections of Salesforce, and what are the things which we need to consider when we are implementing the solution. And lastly, we'll discuss about the integration. So how you will actually integrate Salesforce from an external system. So I guess it's really important to know, why is this important to you? What is the purpose of this session? So the reason why it is actually important to you, so when we are actually having a Salesforce solution, or we want to implement a Salesforce solution, we don't want to think about how we will implement and get the job done. We always need to look into the solution from a different angles, and these are the 5 key things which you need to consider when you're implementing solution. How actually why this is important? Because it will actually elevate your user experience and adoption of Salesforce solution. It will have a performance and scalability benefit as well. So when you're designing the solution based on different considerations, your solution will be scalable, and then obviously it will perform better in a long term. And again, once you have the user experience and adoption, you will actually get the benefit of the investment with the business is making. So this is a really key thing to understand, that when you are actually implementing the solution, how well it will be received from the user, because in the end, we are implementing the solutions for the users to use. This will bring me to the first slide of system architecture. I will actually, if you have any question, you can actually put on the chat. I can see the chat comments, so you can put on the chat, and I can actually answer them in the end of my presentation, or whenever I fit actually. So just keep the session, keep this engagement going on. Right. So first thing is system architecture. Right. So what does it even mean from a Salesforce perspective? Right. So first thing, from a system architecture perspective, when we go to the client, like the very first day, right? So we need to understand what is the org strategy like from the client. So we need to consider, are we doing the solution? Will it cover with a single org implementation, or it will require like multiple Salesforce instances? So there is a benefit, implications, and consideration for both options, and we need to be mindful of that. So multi-org scenario is not really applicable for the small clients. It's mostly relevant when you have a client which are actually based on multiple locations, and an enterprise level client where there are different business process going on. But still, you need to consider and basically assess what is actually the correct org strategy for the solution. Like for single org, there are some benefits, right? So it will provide 360-degree view of reporting. All your users will be in one place. So if you want to do the reporting, it will be easy. All the data will be in the single org. So it is actually provide you 360 benefit degree view of the reporting. Then you will actually also have a fewer integration. So imagine that if the Salesforce is connected to an external systems, then you need to build an integration only from one org to the external system. It could be any type of integration, right? It could be point to point, it could be via ESB, but this is actually which will allow you the fewer integration. And again, it will provide, it could be actually having a common business process across the business. So which will be actually a good use case for the single org. For multi-org, right? So multi-org, when you will consider the multi-org scenario, when you will have some specific requirements around data residency. So it's in some cases, the customer want to put their data in their local data servers, right? So in that case, you need to build an org which will basically have applied data residency requirements. Then multi-org scenario will be considered when your solution is actually hitting the technical limits of Salesforce. Like for example, the number of users, number of community users in the Salesforce instance. Currently it is 100 million, right? So but then you need to consider about what are the different, if they are actually hitting that limit, then you need to consider a multi-org. Then you could think about that scenario when you will actually have different business process for different users. So let's say if you have a an org which is actually based in New Zealand, and then you have a based in actually Philippines, and you have you have London, you have somewhere in US. So each could have like a very different processes, right? So you need to consider, and if they have a significant different process and different user base and they don't need to actually interact with each other, then a multi-org is actually best for you, because you will not basically adding a noise in the single org for the different regions. So this will have an impact. So what it means that when you provide the multi-org scenario, then you need to consider how you will actually implement the changes. So if you're developing a common change, how you will actually deploy that change into multiple orgs, right? So there are concepts which you can actually think of, like for example, building a packages, and packages like there's a 1 generation, there are packages, 10 generation packages, which is a 2nd generation package, and unlock packages, right? So you can actually you create unlock packages, and you can deploy the common features across the multi-org. So you need to consider about these things when you are actually implementing the multi-org scenario. And then the next thing will be how you will surface the report across the multiple orgs, right? So then you need to consider about thinking about something surfacing the reports which are coming from different org. You can actually think about building in CRM analytics on top of multiple orgs. So these are the things which you need to consider about the org strategy. I'm emphasizing on this because it's like a first step in your journey. You need to basically do the right decision when you are starting the journey. Now the second thing is on and off platform, right? So I guess whenever you are actually implementing something, Salesforce is not going to be only system which you actually the customer will have. So there will be always systems in and around like Salesforce. So you need to consider what is the best thing actually you want to keep in Salesforce, and what is actually the things which you want to keep outside the Salesforce. So for example, I'll give you an example. Salesforce is actually not meant to do the financial operations like ERP, right? Order fulfillments and like the invoice generations. Those are the things which are actually meant to do in the ERP. Similarly, like for example, if you want to implement like a finance planning or something system, there could be already a system doing that. So you don't want to implement everything in system. So you need to understand what is the best thing you can actually keep in Salesforce, and how best you can interact Salesforce to external system. And that's where the concept is, like you want to retain some systems, right, in the landscape. Then you want to what it means is actually you don't, when you start your implementation, you don't want to decommission everything. You want to retain what the system which are doing their job fine, and then you consider what are the partial decommission system. Let's say for example, ERP is doing the order fulfillment, but it's also maintaining the lead data and the customer data. So there's a concept called partial decommission. So you can take the some functionality from that external system and actually put in the Salesforce. Then you have a decommission system, right? So for example, if there's a lead generation tool already present, and then you have implementing Salesforce, then what you can do is actually decommission that system and bring that functionality in Salesforce, because the Salesforce is actually meant to do this, right? Now the Salesforce licenses, right? So Salesforce licenses, so this is the third step in the journey. So there are different types of Salesforce licenses, as we all know, like internal users, customer users, partner users, guest users. So you need to be really careful about which license you need to give to your user, because each license will give you certain functionality. And if you give the right license, then they will actually perform everything actually in the Salesforce instance, right? Now, for example, give you an example from a customer user perspective. There are different licenses in the customer users, right? You have a customer community license. You have a customer community license, and then customer community plus license, right? Customer community plus license give you the reporting capability, the advanced sharing capability, but customer community license doesn't give you that. So you don't need to understand what is the use case you were trying to solve, and try to actually give the right license to that particular user. Then you have partner license, partner community license, guest users. So I guess on this level, you need to understand what is the best license you want to give. There is a sales cloud, service cloud, platform license, customer community license, partner license. You need to understand what is the use case and what is the best license you can give to that user. But then when you are actually implementing, you need to think about the mobile strategy element as well, right? So you have a Salesforce, standard Salesforce element. It gives you a lot of functionality which you can actually surface on handheld devices. But then there are certain features there which is not basically available for a standard mobile app. Then you need to consider about giving them the hybrid mobile app, which will be built on the native language like Swift or Java, and then it will use a mobile SDK to leverage Salesforce features, right? So you need to consider about, like, for example, if you have an extensive offline requirement, then you need to consider building a hybrid mobile app. For example, if you have a geolocation requirement when you were trying to basically find out the location of the person which is actually on the go. So these things cannot be done within a standard mobile app. So you need to consider about using a native mobile app. So when you are actually trying to implement it, you need to consider all different options. Will that standard mobile work? If not, what are the different options I have? So this is actually really important because Salesforce is mobile first. Mobile first. What it means is actually that when you are trying to implement Salesforce solution, think about how it will be actually working in handheld devices, because most of the time your users will be on the go, especially in the remote environment, right? When you are trying to actually implement something, you need to consider how actually it will look in the mobile device. Will it actually work? Is it like, have I actually added too many fields in the page layout, which is like too much scrolling for the user? Because especially from a sales user perspective, they will not be going to be inside in an office and doing Salesforce stuff, right? They will be on the go. So you need to consider about this. Then you have a mobile publisher concept, right? So basically the mobile publisher is exposing the Salesforce functionality in the community, and it will allow you to basically publish an app in an iOS and Google Play stores. So the customer can download that app and then they can actually use the Salesforce community from their mobiles. So this is really important to actually understand the mobile strategy. Then you have a document strategy. So again, Salesforce is a SaaS service. So now Salesforce is not like a document management system. You can actually you can just upload all the files. So it has got a storage limit, right? And it depends based on the number of users, you actually have in Salesforce, right? So it actually calculates the file storage. It's actually calculated based on the number of users you have in the Salesforce. So you need to consider about, is it standard file will be fine, or I need to actually use File Connect, which will let me actually store the file in external system, but then I can reference or copy that file in Salesforce. Or maybe external file storage solution, which you need to connect with Salesforce, or maybe some managed package which does that for you, right? So all those things actually need to consider. So for example, if there is a requirement where the customers or internal users are taking pictures and then constantly taking pictures and uploading that pictures against your Salesforce records, then you need to consider, okay, if each file is actually 1 MB and I have actually like 10,000 users doing Salesforce things for every day, it's gonna hit my Salesforce file storage limit. So you need to consider about thinking about something, or maybe leveraging external document solution and then just link that external document solution to Salesforce. Because like I said, you don't need to solve everything inside Salesforce. You need to be like really smart about making the decision that what will be in Salesforce versus what will be outside Salesforce. And the last thing in the system architecture is a reporting strategy. So when you're considering the reporting requirement, reporting is actually the key. It is actually analytics on top of your data. So you have a concept of standard report, right? So you can actually create standard report types versus custom report types. The custom report type can go up to 4 levels. You can actually create reports, and it is actually really useful when you're trying to service Salesforce data. You can export the Salesforce report as well. So if you're trying to view more than 2,000 record, let's say, you will give an ability to export the report with a Salesforce standard functionality. They can view that data in an Excel, right? And then, for example, list views. So I consider list view as also a kind of reporting, because, for example, if you have a customer user and that customer user has got the customer community license. Now, Customer community license doesn't actually give you access of reports to how you will surface the data of the historic cases they want to see. So you can just create a list view. List view is kind of like report, right? You can just put the filter based on the case status. You can put the filter on the case origin, and you can do a lot of things with the list view. So think about that, like if you want to surface the reporting, does that license support reporting? If not, what are the different options you have? And CRM analytics, right? So this is actually the product which used to be called Wave. Then it actually changed, and it used to be called like I think it was something else. Then actually it changes to CRM analytics. Now CRM actually can talk to multiple different systems. It can actually talk to your Snowflake, any data lake which you have in your landscape. It can connect to your data warehouse. It can connect to your ERP, D3. It can bring the data in Salesforce and put the manipulation of data and surface your 360-degree view of that particular data, right? So list, and then this is actually CRM analytics, right? So now the second thing is actually Tableau. Tableau is far beyond that CRM analytics, right? In Tableau, you can actually do far more BI kind of like analytics. So if you want to send the trends, sentiments, a lot of things actually you can actually consider about Tableau. So you have to have an options of different types of reports in Salesforce, and you need to consider about different options of Salesforce, right? So now that let me just give you, this is the high level. So it will give you food for thought. Think about it when you're doing it. I'll share my slides afterwards as well. So when you're doing it, just don't do it with a narrow-minded thing where this is actually the solution, this is the problem. Think about every aspect, and it will guide you to basically perform the better decisions, right? So the next thing is I have is data, right? So data is actually the key thing. Now, again, as you can see, from a data perspective, you have to understand Salesforce object. What is the Salesforce object? Standard object, custom object, external object, big object. When you're implementing the solution, you try to think, okay, is it going to be done in a standard object? What is the benefit of the standard object? It will give me an out of the box automation, right? For example, in an opportunity, you can actually get a benefit of opportunity split, opportunity team member, opportunity forecasting. In quota, you can get a concept of quote templates. You can get a lot of things in standard objects, and when Salesforce gives a release, it will always add features on a standard object. But if the standard object is not actually meeting the criteria, then you can actually consider thinking about a custom object as well. So for example, if you want to do something like a questionnaire or something you want to build, right? So there's no standard object, but you can actually go for a custom object in that solution. So not everything needs to be done in the standard object. So if there's an edge case where you're trying to implement something which is not actually tightly fit to the standard object landscape, then you can actually always consider about external object. So sorry, custom object. External objects. So external object is just a concept of data virtualization, right? So if there is a data which is actually sitting in your ERP, in your external system, and you want to bring that data in Salesforce without storing that data in Salesforce, then you can actually basically bring that data with an external object using an OData connector. So that will allow you to actually expose the data of your external system without storing the data in Salesforce, right? So it is an option you can actually consider. Then there's a concept of big object. Big object lets you actually archive like a data or keep the data in billion. So it has got a limit of billion records. So if you are trying to implement a solution where you're trying to actually archive the data and you don't want to lose it's a kind of like you don't want to basically use that data into day-to-day basis, then you can consider about big object. There are some limitations on that big object. Like for example, you can't really access big objects from UI. You have to put a query or something to actually fetch that data, but you can still consider that option. Then you have the second thing is LDV, which is we call it large data volume, right? So for example, if your actually object is like having a lot of records, then that will actually let you have a slow performance, slower search, slower queries, slower sandbox refresh. Like when I say LDV, it's more than 4 million, 5 million records in an object. Then you need to consider about how you will make sure that you will archive the data which you don't need. So you need to consider about the when you are trying to implement something, you need to consider about what is the impact of that and how many records I will actually have on that object. And you will basically think about how I'll make sure that I will have a mitigation strategy in case the object is actually hitting the limit of like 5 millions or something. So how you mitigate it? So mitigation is again like you have a concept of standard index. Like Salesforce provide you some fields which is a standard index, like name, record type, lookup fields. These are things which are standard index. What it means is actually Salesforce has already behind the scene indexed those fields. So when you query it and use those fields as your filter criteria, then its query will be faster. But there's a concept of custom index. You can always request Salesforce to put a custom index in your field. So when you see there is a query and it's taking too long to actually process, then you can think, okay, what is the field which I am actually using in the filter criteria, and ask Salesforce to index that. So what it means is actually that it will let you actually retrieve the record faster, right? So you can always think, and then how you can actually tell which query is taking to which time. You can always go to a query plan tool in Salesforce in a developer console, where you can actually find how long the query is taking, and then you can actually think about the custom indexing, which when you're trying to put the indexes, you can make this queries a selective queries, like queries taking time. How can I making query as a selective query? Then you have a concept of skinny tables. So a skinny table let you actually Salesforce, what it does is behind the scene, it joins. So Salesforce keeps standard fields and custom fields in a separate object. But when you request Salesforce to enable the skinny table, it creates a join between these two tables and give you a one table behind the scene. So when you're querying it, Salesforce doesn't need to go to two tables to fetch your data. So but the skinny table only applicable for certain objects. So you need to consider that as well. Then LDVD mitigation is actually also cross-object formula fields. So if your formula fields are trying to actually have reference of multiple objects, and that particular object has got a large volume of data, then it will actually have an impact. So you need to consider about building that formula field into that so that it refers only that particular object, or maybe you use a data preparation or something to put it as a text field or something like that. So data migration strategy, you need to consider how you will actually load the data in. So because when you're trying to implement the Salesforce, you will basically load that data in Salesforce as a greenfield implementation, or maybe there's an existing Salesforce instance which you want to load. So you need to think about how you can actually avoid record locking. Let's say, for example, if you're trying to load data using bulk API and you are doing this in a parallel mode, and Salesforce try to update record, same record in two threads, then it will lock the record and it will give you the error. So you want to consider how I can actually avoid it. So how you can avoid it, you can group by that particular data set by a parent ID so that we can actually only refer in a certain order. Then data preparation. So for example, if you're trying to load the data, you want to stop the automation rules or stop the validations rule as well. So it will basically reduce the commit time in Salesforce. Whenever you're saving the record, Salesforce does a lot of things. If there's an automation rule, if there's a validation rule, trigger, flow, so you want to reduce that. How can you actually reduce this is by actually deactivating a lot of things. And if you deactivate it, means that the fields which you are populating with the automation won't be getting populated. So you need to prepare those fields, data of those fields externally, and then load it, and then turn on that particular automation. Then you have an archival strategy, right? So basically you need to build about the retention policy. I want to keep only data of 2 years, and then when I will have it, I will actually archive the data. Similarly goes I want to keep all the files for 7 years, and then I will actually archive those data. So need to consider about archiving strategy, and there are tools available to do that. Like you can consider about different managed packages available like Own Backup and all that. It will let you archive certain data in files in Salesforce. Then the governance is really important because you need to understand like stewardship. Who is actually the owner of the data? What's their role? What are they doing actually with the data? What's the data residency requirements? Is there any data residency requirement? If you want to keep that data in Salesforce, where it will be stored? Does the client have a specific requirement that it has to be stored in the local region or local data center? So you need to consider those things as well, data quality and ownership. So it will give you again high level overview. I'm not going to do a detail in each topic, but I'm giving you an overview of what the things you need to consider when you are implementing the solution. Um, next is solution architecture, right? So solution architecture is an actual solution which you're trying to implement. So again, we all know these are when you are trying to implement something in Salesforce, you need to think about declarative solution. What it means is actually that you have fields and object, right? So you have a standard fields, objects. You try to actually implement the Salesforce with the objects and fields you have. Then you have a different automation session options, like you have a flows, like we all love flows, right? And then you have like workflows. It used to be workflows, process builders, like, but we don't use that anymore. So there are some automation things which you can use actually to build your solution and put the smarts in your solution. Then you have a communications tool, like you can actually send the email from Salesforce natively. Like you don't need to implement an email solution. Like there are out of the box features. Like for example, if there are multiple individuals try to win the same deal, then you have a concept of opportunity and opportunity team member. So you need to consider about what's your problem and how you're trying to, what are the different options available with a point and click, and then you will actually pick that option and actually implement that. So it's really important to understand the options which you have, which are available. So like I said in the beginning, like you have like a standard object. What the reason why you're doing a standard, because it gives you a lot of things as part of that object. And when you have that, then you will actually see what are the different things you can actually achieve with that standard object. Then you always think about buy versus build approach with an app exchange app. So let's say you want to implement something in Salesforce. I would give an example of, let's say you want to assign leads in a really complex way. Then you don't need to build that in Salesforce from the scratch. You can always think about installing an app exchange app, let's say distribution engine or something like that, like which will actually allow you to basically have the same functionality. So you don't need to build from scratch. Like similarly, document generation in e-signature, that's a good one, because Salesforce is not meant to generate the documents. You can always do it with a VF page, PDF libraries, or but then, for example, if you have an extensive document generation going on with the different languages, with a different complex template, you can always consider using different document generation tool like SDocs, Conga. For e-signature, you can actually do the same, like Conga Sign, DocuSign. There's a bunch of stuff which are there. Like, so when you are trying to implement declarative, then you need to think, okay, well, if there is already a solution available, let's try to leverage them and actually build the solution. Then you have an option of Salesforce offerings as well, right? So you have license add-on. So I'll give you an example. So for example, if you want to actually have an implementation where you want to send the SMS to the customers or your internal users with on the mobile device, as well as in your WhatsApp or Facebook, then you can consider having like a digital engagement add-on license, right? So you don't need to build an integration on top of it from the scratch. You can use add-ons like digital engagements, omni-channel, knowledge. There's a bunch of add-ons actually which are available. So you can always think about how I can leverage those add-ons in my solution. And then we have Salesforce products and industry cloud. Now, so there are so if you have actually a requirement where you are trying to if you're trying to actually implement something, let's say someone is actually going onto the field and they are doing the installation and maintenance job, you have like Salesforce product for that, right? So you have like Salesforce field service or CPQ or stuff. So you can consider about expanding your horizon and see what is the use case. If there's any Salesforce product and extension available, think about using that and how you can implement that in your solution. Then you have industry cloud. So if you have a specific field, financial industry which you are working with, or your health industry or non-profit, you have a dedicated industry cloud solutions for that, right? Like you have a velocity, you have a financial service cloud, like you have non-profit cloud, revenue cloud. So you think about that as well. Then programmatic solutions, right? So programmatic solutions is like when you're trying to implement something, not everything can be done declarative, right? So it doesn't mean it's not right. So sales will always give you a solution that you can build something with Lightning Web Components and Apex to automate your business process, or develop UIs which are not possible in Salesforce standard UIs. So always think about that as well as an option, not the first option, but if you are not able to solve with the standard views and stuff, you can always think about extending your solution with the programmatic solution. Then the external system, this is really important, because like I mentioned in the beginning, is Salesforce is not actually meant to solve everything. So for example, if you're trying to process a payment using a payment gateway, Salesforce is actually not meant to do that. So you can always build an integration with your existing payment gateway, which will allow customer to pay online, or actually you can build a solution to deduct their recurring payments and all that, like similarly like inventory management, ERP, order processing. So again, when you are trying to implement Salesforce solution, don't try to bring everything in Salesforce solution. Think about what is actually Salesforce meant to do, what are the other external systems are doing, and what we can actually, how we can implement a solution which can work with the customer seamlessly. Then the deployment approach, again, this is like, there's a lot of things which you can need to consider. Again, in a complex environment, you need to consider how you will actually push the same changes to your the higher environments. Like you need to build your environment strategy, you need to do your branching strategy, especially when the multiple developers are working on it. You can't just use change set to actually, because then it will override the same file again and again. So you need to build on the branching strategy and environment strategy. This is again food for thought. When you are building the large implementation, think about how you can actually optimize that the whole deployment approach, so can everyone actually can work seamlessly. So now the next one is the security. Now security, again, the first one, so we have discussed what we have discussed so far, right? So what we have discussed is, we have discussed the system architecture, when you're trying to implement what would be the org and stuff. Then you have discussed the data, how you will manage the data inside the solution. Then we have discussed about the actual solution architecture, like how you will implement declarative versus programmative and all that. Now, when you build that Salesforce solution, it's really important to secure that solution from an inbound connections, outbound connections, because like I said, like Salesforce is a cloud-based solution, right? So you need to secure that, like internally and externally. There are two levels of that security. One is how you will secure the Salesforce data with different users and permission, and then the next level is how you will secure the actual instance of Salesforce from an inbound and outbound connections. So first I will talk about how you will secure internally data between different users. So you have a concept of, again, some of you might already know this, so I'm gonna just discuss on a very high level: objects and field visibility. So when you're trying to implement something, you think about profiles, permissions, and field level security, app permissions. So these are all the native capabilities of Salesforce, which will basically restrict certain users to extract to basically see certain elements of Salesforce. So think about how you can achieve that. Then once you have the object field level permission, then you can actually have a declarative sharing concept, which basically allow or restrict users on a record level. So what are the different options I have? I have obviously the baseline sharing and OWD. So when you're trying to implement, think about, okay, if I actually make this account as a public OWD, right, or public read only OWD, then basically I'm exposing this accounts to everyone, right? What's the impact of that, right? Or vice versa, if I am making this account as a private, it means the owner can only see that account. What is actually the impact of that? So you need to consider this OWD, because OWD needs to be very like the restrictive access. So you can't just give that OWD, the higher OWD to objects. So think about this OWD first, then role hierarchy, how you are actually building that role hierarchy. So in a company, most likely you have regional managers, you have country managers, you have CEO, you have different support engineers, you have system engineers. So how I will actually build my role hierarchy. So for example, the concept is when I actually own the account, the role above my actually role can see that account, right? So what is actually what role should I give that user, so that what is the impact on the other users? Then you have a concept of sharing rules. like you have a concept of owner-based sharing rule. So if I own the account and I am actually based in New Zealand, I want to share the accounts to all users in New Zealand. How can I achieve this? It's an owner-based sharing rule, criteria-based sharing rule. How I can share it? Because when you're building the solution, you need to make sure that you restrict everything on and actually only expose those records to users which absolutely need the access, right? So you can't just make everything as a public, because then it's a cascading effect. Everyone can see everything, everyone can update everything. So you need to be really careful about when you're exposing records to different users. So, but everything cannot be achieved with the owner-based sharing and criteria. Then you have a concept of manual sharing, right? So which is like apex sharing. So for example, if you have a requirement which you have a dynamically assign a project manager to project, and based on dynamic assignment, you want to share that particular record to to project manager. You can't really just build that sharing rule or criteria based sharing rule. You have to write an apex code for that, which is like apex sharing, right? And then you can actually assign different things. This is more around like when you're doing this as a programmatic sharing rule, you have a concept of raw cost. Like you can actually basically tell Salesforce, the reason why I have actually shared this record is because it's a PM of that particular project. So you can actually say in raw cost project manager, you can actually build the custom raw cost or manual. So you need to consider about this. So when you're doing the programmatic sharing, the Salesforce will share that record to that person and then create a shared record behind the scene. This is all about the access within Salesforce. So imagine user has got an access in Salesforce, but we want to restrict the access based on the profile and roles within Salesforce environment, right? Now the next layer is actually how you can secure this from a system perspective. There are some things you need to consider about it. So first one being platform data security, which is like, how there's a concept of classic encryption, which is out of the box thing, free encryption. So you create a text encrypted field, and it will let you mask that field as well. So if you want to have a social security number or a mobile number which you want to encrypt it, you can just do the classic encryption text field. Now you have a concept of Salesforce Shield, which is Salesforce offering, which allows you to do the platform encryptions, the event monitoring, in the field audit trail. So that will give you more encryption as part of our offering. So it will let you basically manage your own encryption key as well. So you need to consider about, okay, if the customer has actually keeping a social security number, is it the Salesforce in Shield is actually the right option? And what's the impact of that actually encrypting that field? Then again, I discuss masking as well. So for example, if you are actually doing the classes encryption, you can always say, what is my masking looks like? You don't need to do like static or cross or whatever. So you can actually do this, and then you need to discuss about the compliance as well. What is actually my compliance tells? Where should the data be and how well it needs to be encrypted? Then moving on to the identity management, when you have an identity management concept, and it's a very detailed topic, so I'm not gonna go cover like a lot of detail, but I'll just give you a food for thought. Single sign-on. I know we all know that it's basically to allow user to log in multiple system with a single login, right? It's a simple definition. So which is my identity store? Let's say the customer is already using Active Directory. Think about implementing single sign-on. Why you manage Salesforce credentials in Salesforce and your external ERP credentials in Active Directory? Just try to think actually about from a user experience perspective and implement a single sign-on, so that once they log in into Active Directory or their corporate credentials, they should be able to log in with all their systems. Then we have a concept of user authentication, right? So authentication is actually who you are, like. So you need to basically implement authentication, like you can implement on different levels. So we all know that if from Salesforce, if a user is going, they can actually put the Salesforce username, name and password. But what about user is trying to access Salesforce resources by an API? There are different things they need to tell to do to get that access of protected resource sitting inside the Salesforce, right? So, and then you have a concept of user authorization, so which is the same. So if we Salesforce know who you are, what can you access in Salesforce, which is the other part, right? So there are different workflow, and I'm sure some of you might already know like a There are different OAuth flows like user agent flow, or web server flow, like a jot flow. So different use cases for different. So for example, if a user is trying to access uh, our Salesforce from an app, so you need to implement the user agent flow, because the mobile app cannot actually keep the client secret, right? So, or for example, if MuleSoft is talking to Salesforce, then you need to, it's server to server integration, then you need to implement jot flow. So basically, the different things, different purpose, but you need to make sure that you are giving the right access to Salesforce. And how you will actually achieve it. So from an inbound connection, you can actually configure the connected app. So connected app, the beauty of the connected app is actually it will allow you only specific user to access Salesforce, and it can actually, you can, in connected app, you can actually configure the scope. A lot of times I actually get asked the question, why can't just we share the username and password? But when you share the username and password, that means you are actually giving the access of full Salesforce instance. But in connected app, you can actually define the scope. So let's say that person on that connection can only access API. That connection can only access lightning components. So you can basically define on the connected app, and that's the beauty of the connected app. From an outbound connection, you configure name credentials. Like you can configure name credentials as a JOT or password authentication or OAuth. There are different things you can configure to secure an outbound connection so that the other party can actually basically get your call as well. Then you have like a portal security, right? So this is, again, when you are implementing the solution, you need to think about, okay, this is internal, how my customer is going to authenticate in their portal, how my partners are actually going to authenticate in their portal. So you need to think about when you're implementing the solution, because whenever you are actually implementing the solution, this is actually for your customer will have their customers, and they might need to access Salesforce to do certain things. So you need to consider about that as well, and when you are trying to implement the solution. So again, the portal security is obviously the sharing sets, right? So there's a sharing set concept where, like, for a customers can actually access Salesforce record using sharing set. And for example, if a customer has got customer community license, then they can actually you can build a sharing set and actually expose certain things to your customer users. Then you have a concept of sharing set group. Look, for example, if your customer is actually owning that record, how I can actually expose that particular record to my internal users, right? So if the customer is creating a case, how can I actually assign, basically give the access to that case to internal users? So you need to basically think about the sharing set group. Social sign-on, you can always implement it auth providers in Salesforce like Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, like, because your customer won't be actually bothering using their Salesforce credentials, right? They want to just click on the Facebook icon and then they just want to access the community using Facebook. Or maybe they have a custom auth provider. Maybe they are already using some system which they want to use as their authentication provider in the community. So you need to think about implementing these things when you are actually trying to implement the portal. So this will actually give you an overview of, from a Salesforce record perspective, and again from a system perspective, how you want to secure it. Which brings me to the last part of this pillars, right? And I know it's too much information, but I will share these slides in the with you guys, and then I think this session will be recorded. But again, the purpose of this session is to give a high level overview of what are the different things you need to think about when you're implementing the solution, or what are the things you need to ask to your client when you're trying and propose some solutions, right? Integration is a key one as well. So for example, integration patterns, right? I'm sure some of you might already have seen these integration patterns in Salesforce docs. So there are different Salesforce patterns, right? Request and apply, fire and forget, batch data. So they each has got different use cases. Like, so for example, if the user want to see the result, let's say they are trying to process their credit card information, or they want to check the credit check, right? And you have built something in Salesforce using external service or something like that, and they want to see the result upfront. So you can't implement fire and forget because you don't know when the result will come back. So you implement a request and reply pattern. Or maybe there is a processing which, if there is an order actually you created and the order needs to be fulfilled in an ERP, and the user is not actually waiting for that particular response, so you can implement fire and forget. So each use cases and each pattern is actually this basically for each particular use case, and you need to think about the use case and implement the pattern. So batch data sync, right? So batch data sync is, again, if you want to process large data from an external system, and you want to load something in Salesforce in a bulk, or do so you can actually implement batch data sync. But data visualization, I already covered an external object. There is a data sitting in an external system. You just want to surface that data without storing that data in Salesforce. You can actually think about data virtualization using external object. Then declarative options, right? So there are always a declarative option in Salesforce to integrate something. You don't need to code for everything. And I sum up being an outbound message, and I know outbound message only supports SOAP, but that's fine, because some of times SOAP is actually fine for doing the outbound message integration, because it gives you native capability of retrying and everything. So just think about something what the platform offers for integration, like platform event. You can publish the platform event using Flow now. So you have a lightning triggered platform event triggered lightning flow. So once the platform event is filed, you can even publish, or you can actually call a flow. So think about publishing the platform event. I know some of you already know that this is just like creating an object and creating fields. So it's all out of the box and point and click. External services. This is just a recent concept to actually invoke an API from a Salesforce using point and click. So you can configure an external service, and that external service with an invocable action of external service can be used in the flow, and then you can actually call an API of external system. And now even MuleSoft API, any point APIs as well. Change data capture is actually one of them. So Salesforce provides this capability. Anytime something changes, it fires an event. So it has a count a limitation of 5 objects, but you can always purchase more. Programmatic approach, right? So programmatic options is a Apex call out. So you can think about if there is something actually which you want to do and you want to make an Apex call out, you have always that option of making an HTTP call outs from Salesforce. When you're doing the integrations, again, it's really important to know the system of records, system of truth. Like, so for example, if Salesforce is source of truth of customer, then you need to keep that in a Salesforce and push that data in an external system. And for example, if invoices in ERP, so invoices is actually source of truth. So you just need to consider where is the source of the truth and how I will bring that record in Salesforce and give a better experience to users. And again, we have a concept of external ID. So for example, if you have a customer and customer is also in ERP, you can actually always create an external ID of ERP in Salesforce to reference that particular record of ERP in Salesforce, so that you can link two different records. Need to decide on integration frequency as well, like business use case, platform capability, govern the limits, right? This is really important to understand and work with the business to understand what are different. So again, so Salesforce has got a limitation, and there's no limit on an API, outbound API calls, but there is a limit of inbound API calls, right? So you need to think about that as well. Now, integration point to point, again, integration landscape. There is always like a point-to-point integration. So if it's a really basic integration, you can go with a point-to-point. But if there is an orchestration required, so for example, I'm going to credit check, but credit check systems are actually based in US, Canada, Australia, Philippines, or whatever, right? So basically, then this is actually needs to be orchestrated in the ESB, in the MuleSoft. So MuleSoft needs to talk to different system based on the single API call. So you need to consider and think about the use case, what you're trying to do, and implement the best thing actually. So because ESB orchestration is not an easy thing to do, or it's not actually a cost-effective solution to the client. Again, so this is actually you need to be considered and actually think about it. So again, this is on a super high level. The session I'm trying to cover, and again, I'll repeat myself that I will be sharing these slides with you guys. But when we are implementing the solution on a very high level, we need to consider about three key things: business, process, technology, right? Just technology is an enabler, right? So we can't just put technology in front of the business. So we need to understand the business problem, business goal. And when you're designing this solution, consider about company growth. So for example, if they have, what is the growth trajectory of that business, if they are, how well they are growing, and basically implement the solution which actually has to be aligned with your business needs. Then you have you need to consider our process. User experience is again the key thing, how you're implementing the solution from an end user perspective. So think about when you're implementing, if you are actually the user, what do you want to see in the system, and what is actually the best experience you can give, and then that's how you should actually define. And obviously basically your solution provide ease to day-to-day operation. Because if actually adding an admin to their daily day-to-day job, then it's basically something is actually wrong and you will lose the adoption. And lastly, you will have you need to think about performance and scalability. So when you are trying to implement the solution now, you need to consider if the company is growth is 10% over years, then you need to consider, okay, now I have actually 100K customers, but in 2 years time I will actually have 1 million customers or 500K customers. What is my solution and how actually my solution will actually basically be fine for those growths. So again, this is actually going to be a wrap of my session. I actually, if you have any question, you can always drop a note in this. And I know there are a couple of questions. So before I actually go to that question, do you guys actually have the referral link? So let me just share this referral link for you guys. So we are going to share some certification vouchers and gift vouchers. So what I'm going to do is I'll paste the link here. So if you can actually go and sign up here, and then once you sign up, I will actually start the referral, and then let's see who is the winner. So but in the meantime, let's see what Q&A we have. All right, so Ali actually asked a couple of questions. Could you please enlighten about impact analysis and overall design, especially few of the clients want to enhance their existing implementation? So I guess this is a really good question, right? So for example, if you have an existing solution, right? So now you need to understand what is currently implemented. And for example, is it actually worth it to scale it, or you want to re-architecture it as well? Right. So for example, enhancing, so you can't just really enhance the stuff. So for example, if there's an existing implementation and the implementation with custom object for lead, you can't just build fields on the existing custom object, right? You need to think about it. Is it actually scalable? And again, back to the basic, is it the right choice? And think about that process which I have explained, and then actually you can actually scale. And obviously from an architecture and solution architecture, this is a specific sequence like Go, declarative, dimension. Good question again. So again, like I discussed about this solution one. Yes, I would suggest you to go to in a linear order, which is like try to think actually if you have a declarative solution available. And if not, then actually you can always think about App Exchange or programmatic solution. So programmatic solution and App Exchange and Salesforce solution is all number 2 for me. So it's not like you go App Exchange and then, so it's more like just thinking about it cannot be done declarative. What are my options and how can I achieve it? And the last one being who's the main keystone to own these all key layers, the tech lead. Again, so so for this particular thing, there is a concept of center of excellence, right? So you need to, in a center of excellence, you have a governance and steering committee, and there are certain things which actually a technical team needs to own. So from an architecture perspective, you need to be involved in integration architects, solution architect, data architects. Then you have tech leads and VFS team. But from a prioritization, and then from example, change control board, change management, this is big business. But then, for example, if there's a compliance thing, regulations thing, then you have like a legal. So it's a combination of things which need to be working together. Cool. Awesome. I will actually try to, I hope you guys already have put it your referral thing, and I am going to basically